Hey, what's up, Grand Point United? Thank you so much for joining us this morning for our online worship experience. My name is Dan. I am the pastor for Grand Point United, and we are just ecstatic that we can be here together in worship this morning. A few things before we dive in that I just want you to be aware of. First off, if you want to join us in the chat for the video today, you do need to have a YouTube account. You need to be logged in. And also, you need to be either on a PC or on your mobile device. The TV apps don't really have an easy chat feature. So if you want to, you can watch it on your TV and chat on your computer, however it works out for you. But just know that we would love for you to stop in and say hi and just be able to connect with us through that this morning. You may have already seen some images this morning throughout our slideshow. You're going to see some potentially through our worship here today. That all came from you. In fact, we just put out a challenge this week to share a verse on our social media that would be able to help somebody experience hope in the middle of what we are dealing with right now. If you haven't done that yet, feel free to find that post and connect with that and be able to share a verse, because we really believe that the Word of God can be the thing that can bring life to people's lives in the midst of all this uncertainty and all of this fear. If you aren't already following us on social media, check out our Facebook page and our Instagram. We would love to be able to connect with you through that. And if you haven't yet already, subscribe to this YouTube channel and make sure you hit that little bell icon, because that'll make sure that you're notified every single time that we launch a video. Hey, let's spend some time here worshiping together today.
Darkness tries to roll over my bones, and sorrow comes to steal the joy I own. Brokenness and pain is all I know. I won't be shaken, I won't be shaken. Sing out. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. She no longer has a place to hide. we sing it again. My fear. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Amen.
Heavenly Father, thank you for being the God of tomorrow. Thank you for being in our future, for leading the way. God, we can't see what's going on, and it's scary and makes us nervous. But God, we know that you are there, and there's so much peace in that when we were children. God, we love you so much. We're just thankful for the opportunity and the way to still have church, to still meet together. It's such an honor and a blessing to worship you together from our own living rooms. And God, we love you so much. We do all this in the name of your precious Son, Jesus. Amen. Can't go back to the beginning. Can't control what tomorrow will bring. But I know here in the middle is the place where you promised to be. Not enough. Not enough unless you come. Will you meet me here again? 'Cause all I want is all you are. Will you meet me here again? Oh.
Hey, church, we're going to continue our worship through our giving. We believe that giving back to God just a little bit of what He has so richly blessed us with is an incredible act of faith and worship. We know it's an uncertain time right now, but you never know what God can do with just the smallest gift. You can give by either clicking the link in the description or by mailing it in if you feel more comfortable that way. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so grateful that we have the tools to stay connected even when we can't get together in person. You can stay connected with us throughout the week by connecting with us on Facebook and Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a thing. We've also included a Spotify playlist in the description so you can continue to worship even after the video. And now we're going to dive back in to the topic of forgiveness with Pastor Dan as we wrap up this month's sermon series, D.I.Y.
One of the opportunities that we have all gained in the middle of this quarantine is something that often we feel like we really need, and that is time. We have all gained time in the shutdown of our normal busy schedules. It's challenging sometimes, I think, for us to look beyond the hardships that we're dealing with in the here and now to be able to see some of the positive things that can be happening all around us. But that is one of the things that, at least myself, I am so grateful for. Because in this season, things have been able to slow down and bring me to this place where I can be able to find some positives and be able to connect with God in ways that are deeper and more meaningful than what I've had in the past. Some of you guys probably saw earlier this week my social media post on finding opportunity in the downtime, and that is what this thing was all about. It is about us recognizing the thing that I think so many of us have been handed, and that is time. See, so many of us complain so frequently. How many of you have said this? I know I have. I am too busy to XYZ, right? We say this all the time, and now for the first time probably in most of our lives, we've been forced to stop. We've been forced to slow down. We've been forced to find opportunity in the midst of the quiet. So, are we maximizing these opportunities? Are we finding God in deeper ways? Are we building our relationships in big ways? Because the world will go back to its regularly scheduled program eventually. We're going to get back to our normal pace of life. We're going to get back to the normal, busy, bustling schedule that we're used to. But for the here and now, what can we take from what we're going through right now into that schedule? How can we position ourselves for healthy relationships moving forward? One of the things that I've been incredibly grateful for in the midst of this slowing down has been the opportunity to spend some more time with my family and more time with my daughters. I've been working from home a lot, so as I work from home, I get to kind of hear them playing in the background and get to see them. And I have heard the phrase quite a few times in the midst of some giant imaginative world that they're living in. I've heard one of them break character and come out and say, "She's being mean." This happens more times than I want to admit, because for the most part, my daughters get along amazingly well. In fact, they're kind of best friends, so it's not often really that this happens, but recently, because of the time that they're forced to spend together, it's been coming up. And what ends up happening in the context of this is one of them has their feelings hurt, or one of them is dealing with some sort of tension in the midst of their game, and comes out and says, "She's being mean." And then we naturally do the parent thing. We bring the other girls in. We figure out what's actually going on. We say, "Hey, you have to say you're sorry." And naturally, the daughter who's been hurt doesn't really feel the authenticity here. Like any forced apology, it's kind of hard to feel like they mean it. And so what ends up happening is the girls go off and they start playing again, except for the kid who was hurt. That kid decides to instead take themselves out and pout in the corner. When everyone else has moved on, that one kid is still there in their hurt. And because of that, they actually miss out on the next imagined adventure. They miss out on something that I know that they would enjoy because they're hanging on to the hurt that they have experienced. They're hanging on to this small grudge. Now, luckily, these minor wounds tend to heal fairly quickly, and before too long, they're all together again, playing and starting some new adventure like nothing else had happened. When it comes to some of our more serious hurts, though, many of us deal with it in the same exact way. It leads us to this place where we try and pull ourselves out of the situations, and sometimes that can lead us to greater repercussions in our lives because we refuse to forgive. And when we refuse to forgive, we miss out on some things. Today, that's what we're going to be looking at. We are looking at how when we refuse to forgive, we can miss out. We've been in the midst of this series, D.I.Y, where we have been talking about forgiveness. And we've worked through a bunch of different angles on this thing. We've talked about how we are all called to forgive every time if we're followers of Jesus. We talked about the impact that forgiveness has on our relationships. We got to hear the incredible story from Marie Monville and her story of forgiveness in the midst of an impossible situation, an impossible circumstance. And last week, we talked about how forgiveness starts the party. We talked about how forgiveness should lead us to celebration, which then in turn drives a lifestyle of forgiveness. Well, this week we are continuing that same conversation that we started last week, but this week we are asking the question, what are we missing out on when we choose not to forgive? See, the trouble with forgiveness is that it is a DIY endeavor. And just like your DIY projects that you have at home, there's a lot of potential for us to get into a mess. If we are not living a life of forgiveness, we can end up in this place of amazing potential fallout. This newfound time that we are all getting to experience in the midst of the quarantine is one of those things that allows us now to come to the place where we have an opportunity for self-examination. And some of us have been carrying unforgiveness for a long time. And since now we have the time to do it, now it's time for us to be able to look inward a little bit. Be able to figure out, what have we been living by? Have we been living by forgiveness? Have we been living with some bitterness? Because I'm telling you, if you are living in unforgiveness, it's impacting your life. I can promise you. When you take the time to look at your life, are you holding on to a grudge against somebody? One of the easiest ways to figure out if you are is when you think of that person, how does it make you feel? Do you start to feel bitterness and anger and deal with all of these emotions? Is that stuff what's front and center when you think of this person? If it is, there's a good chance you've been hanging on to unforgiveness. There's a good chance that you've been hanging on to a grudge. Bitterness is a symptom of unforgiveness. It colors all of our relationships. In fact, if we leave unforgiveness unchecked, our relationships in general will be impacted. And besides, who really likes hanging out with a bitter person? It's the best, right? I love hanging out with bitter people. No, nobody does. It's terrible. And you know why it's terrible? Because every one of us feels like when we're around people who live in a bitter kind of lifestyle, that you got to be careful about what you say at every point in time. You kind of have to walk on eggshells because you don't know what it is that you're going to say to set them off. And heaven forbid that you decide to say something about the person that they're actually bitter towards. That can end even worse. When you spend time examining beyond finding that place of a grudge you've been holding on to, can you see, is your lack of forgiveness controlling you? How much time and energy do you spend focusing on your hurt? How much time do you spend focusing on the negative view of a person who hurt you? How much energy do you spend maintaining hatred? Does it keep you from pursuing other things in your life? Or does it keep you stuck in the past, stuck in the hurt, instead of allowing you to look forward? Another major fallout of unforgiveness is a loss of freedom. When we live in unforgiveness, it controls us. So many people that I have talked to have been controlled by a grudge and they don't even realize it. So many people shape their lives because of unforgiveness and they don't understand that that's what's happening. They don't see that they're stuck. They're just consumed by a bitterness. And the unforgiveness is actually obvious to most everybody else who sees them, but it's a struggle for them to be able to see. Because the more they've allowed unforgiveness into their life, the more it has made them captive. And the more alone they've become. They're so stuck living on past hurts that they can't experience the present that they're living in. This is why we need to learn to choose forgiveness even in the midst of our hurt. This is why we need to learn to choose forgiveness when it seems like someone is undeserving of forgiveness. Unfortunately, the people that we tend to struggle with forgiveness the most in our lives are the people who have the deepest connection to us. They're the people that we have the deepest relationship with. That's what has even brought us to this place of hurt to begin with. Today, we're going to be looking at a little bit of family drama that is surrounding this concept of forgiveness. Last week, we worked through the parable of the prodigal son, and Jesus tells this story, this parable, to highlight forgiveness. And we looked at the importance of celebrating forgiveness. Just a quick recap of the story that we looked at last week. Last week, we looked at the story of the prodigal son. There's a man who has two sons, and the younger son demands his inheritance. He basically tells his father, I wish you were dead so I could have the money that is coming to me. The father complies, and he gives the inheritance to the younger son as well as to the older son. Because of the way Jewish custom and Jewish law and tradition worked, the older son would have received 2/3 of the inheritance. The younger son would have only received 1/3, but they both received their inheritance, and the younger son is still willing to accept that smaller amount and cut off his relationship with his father so that he can make this financial gain. Well, the younger son goes off, and he blows all of his money on living it up. He basically does everything that he can, blows all of his money, and then the economy where he is crashes. So he has to find a job in order just to survive. He gets a job feeding pigs for a living, and the reality is he can't even feed himself on what he's making feeding pigs. He decides to go back to his father and beg for forgiveness. He doesn't even want to beg for full restoration. He's not expecting to be welcomed back as a son. He just wants to be a servant because he knows his father's servants are taken better care of than he's being taken care of working on this pig farm. Well, the son heads home, and as he's still a ways out, the father sees the son from a ways off, and he runs to him, and he embraces him. This is pretty incredible because in Jewish culture, a wealthy landowner, Jewish man would not have been caught dead running. It would have been undignified. But this guy takes off. He embraces his son. He forgives him, and he restores him to the full position of being a son. And then he throws a party. Forgiveness needs to be celebrated. Well, the whole time we're seeing this part of the story, we also have the perspective of the older son. See, his little brother was incredibly disrespectful to their dad, right? As the good older son, he instead respects his father. He continues on being responsible. He continues working for his father, and life goes back to the way it was, sans little bro. Well, check out Luke 15 with me this morning. We're going to be starting at verse 25. There's a link in the description of our YouTube channel, or our YouTube video here, that will take you straight to that passage. The words will be here on the screen as well, and you can always pull out an analog paper version of the Bible too, but we are starting here in Luke 15, verse 25. Verse 25 says, Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. So the big brother returns from the fields. He's been working all day, and he notices there's a party happening. So he grabs a servant that happens to be near him and says, Hey, what's the deal here? What's going on? In verse 27, it says, And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. So the older brother is pretty ticked off about all this. Little bro, who spit in his father's face and spit in the face of the family, has come crawling back. But instead of his dad saying good riddance, a party is being thrown. So he refuses to join the party. How many of us treat forgiveness of other people just like this? We look at the forgiveness that is offered to others. We look at the party that is rightfully being thrown, and we get a little bit angry. We look at them and we say, but if you knew how they really were, you wouldn't be partying. You wouldn't be offering forgiveness. When we live this thing out, when we refuse to acknowledge the forgiveness in other people, is we're refusing to forgive in ourselves. Notice what this refusal does then. The refusal takes the older brother out of the party. It takes him out of the party, and it takes us out of the party when we refuse to forgive. So instead of celebrating, we sit and we fester in our unforgiveness, which then just causes more hurt, which causes more frustration, and causes more bitterness in our lives. We become party poopers. And we think that in some way we're hurting the other person. But in reality, we're just removing ourselves from the party. See, we think that the other person doesn't deserve forgiveness. If we are followers of Jesus, when we fail to see that forgiveness is undeserved all around, we're living into that ourselves. Because we do not deserve forgiveness in and of ourselves. In fact, Jesus offers forgiveness freely through the sacrifice on the cross when we don't deserve it. So when we refuse forgiveness because we think another person doesn't deserve it, man, we're going against exactly what we've already received. In verse 28, it says, his father came out and he entreated him. So dad comes out from the party, he tries to get him to join the party, and then listen to the son's response. In verse 29, the son says, look, these many years I've served you, and I've never disobeyed your command. Yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. The older brother describes why he refuses to forgive. And notice his reasoning. It has a lot more to do with himself than it does with his younger brother. He says, I've been here. I've been responsible. Where's my party? I've worked for you, but nothing. Here's this kid. He comes home. He blew it all. He blew all of the money. He's living it up. And now he's back and you throw a party? Notice, the older brother seems to forget that he has already received his 2/3 of the inheritance. He's already received more than the younger brother. Most of us who have siblings can relate to this to a small degree because the reality of sibling rivalry means there's always times where you feel like things just aren't quite fair. But look closer at the older brother's arguments here. See, what the older brother thinks is that because he has been faithful, because he has continued to work for his father, that he is entitled to more. He is entitled to more. And he's entitled to more than the son who is in need of forgiveness. He forgets that he has already received more. See, I think this is the trap that so many of us fall into so easily. Instead of celebrating forgiveness, we start to look and we start to ask the same question. Where's my party? I've been following the rules. I've been doing all of this stuff for you, God. But now this person comes along and I'm just supposed to forgive them? I'm supposed to offer them forgiveness? See, as believers, we forget that we have already received Jesus' forgiveness. Jesus uses this parable to illustrate the dangers that are growing within the religious circles of his time, the religious culture that was rising up. Primarily, he's discussing specifically the Pharisees, but I think that this is just as easy for us to do. I think this is the very thing that oftentimes keeps us from forgiving other people. See, we start to think that we're better. We start to think that we're more deserving because we have already accepted his forgiveness and we've been here the whole time. We kind of become like the hipsters who call bands sellout because I knew them before they were cool, right? They get into that whole thing. See, on the outside, our lives look better. They look like they're together. So we think we deserve something greater. We're trying so hard to earn God's forgiveness that when the idea of somebody receiving that forgiveness freely comes up, or worse, the idea of us offering forgiveness freely comes up, it starts to lead to a place of resentment and bitterness because we get caught up on the other people and we start to say, what about me? Look at how much I put in. Look at all this hurt that I have experienced. Look at this life that I've been living. Look at the fact that I have already taken the high road. This is not fair. I think of somebody who gets angry because they missed out on a sale because they bought something too early. And they take it out on the person who bought the items at a cheaper price. I think in the middle of all of this, it's amazing to see the Father's response. Because the Father's response is also God's response to us. In verse 31 it says, He said to him, Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. What the Father reminds the Son is, look, everything of mine is already yours. You already have the relationship with me. Your work is not the thing that makes you have right standing. It's your relationship with me. You're my son. This is exactly what God says to us. Because of that relationship, you should be celebrating with me as well, is how the Father says this. Because the lost son is found. Another one has found forgiveness in relationship. Our relationship with Jesus is the very reason why we should be celebrating forgiveness. Why we need to share that celebration. The trouble with forgiveness for us, though, is when we refuse to acknowledge it, all we're doing is removing ourselves from the party. We're taking ourselves out of the celebration because we're not embracing the forgiveness that Jesus offers and sharing it with other people. That's the simple answer to the question that we started off with this morning. What are we missing out on when we don't forgive? See, what we're missing out on is we remove ourselves from the party. We are sitting and we're pouting in the corner instead of embracing the party. We're letting bitterness, we're letting resentment grow, and we're damaging our relationships in the process. Not only our relationships with the people around us in our lives, but we're also damaging our relationship with God, because our relationship with God is strained when we live with unforgiveness in our hearts. We're missing out on healing, and we're missing out on freedom that comes when we embrace forgiveness and when we choose to forgive, when we choose to celebrate. So how do we learn to join the party instead of separating ourselves? Relationship with Jesus is the center of forgiveness. The incredible thing about a relationship with Jesus is it's not about what we do. It's about what God has already done. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross offers us forgiveness, offers us a chance at life, a chance at hope. And it's not about what we do. It's about accepting that forgiveness and then following Him. The amazing thing about that is, if forgiveness is not about what we do, it's not about what others have done either. When we offer forgiveness to other people, it needs to be without the strings attached. It can't be about what they do. The hard thing about forgiveness is that it does happen as a D.I.Y. project. It happens in ourselves. And because of that, we need to learn how to stop the comparisons. We need to learn how to push that stuff aside and to be able to forgive regardless of the other people's actions. A little bit later in Luke, in chapter 17, Jesus talks to the disciples and he lays this out for them a little bit. He says, temptations to sin are sure to come, but woe to the one through whom they come. It would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were cast into the sea, than that he should cause one of these little ones to sin. Another version says that woe to the one who becomes a stumbling block for somebody else. Look at verse 3 then. Pay attention to yourselves. If your brother sins, rebuke him. If he repents, forgive him. And if he sins against you 7 times in the day, and he turns to you 7 times saying, I repent, you must forgive him. Pay attention to yourselves. Socially, right now, most of us are interacting online. We're not getting time with people in person, and it's incredible to me that we're able to stay this connected. It's incredible that we're able to keep having conversations. It's incredible that we can stay in touch. But in all of this, there is an incredible temptation as well to start playing that comparison game, to start looking outside of ourselves to what looks like greener pastures and allowing that to be the thing that drives our lives, which leads us to a place of unforgiveness. Pay attention to yourselves. Don't be a stumbling block for others. Those are some powerful words that Jesus shares here. So how are you living that out? How are you, instead of posting things that feeds this monster in our online communities, what are you doing to post encouragement? What are you doing to post hope? What are you doing to post life? What are you doing to showcase a lifestyle of forgiveness found in a relationship with Jesus? I think every one of us has this challenge in front of us to step up and to offer forgiveness to those who we've been hanging on to this unforgiveness towards. See, what we've been missing out on when we refuse forgiveness to others is healing of these hurts. We've been missing out on finding freedom. When we choose instead forgiveness, man, God can free us. He can bring us healing. He can offer us life. So this morning, today, as you work through this idea, I invite you, if you haven't yet made the decision to follow Jesus with everything that you are, I challenge you, don't wait. Do it today. The Bible tells us if we confess and believe that Jesus is Lord and that He rose from the dead, we will be saved. We need to choose to accept the forgiveness that Jesus offers us, because the only way that we can live a lifestyle of forgiveness, the only way that we can join the party is if we can experience His forgiveness ourselves. If you haven't made that decision, what are you waiting for? One of the challenges that comes up for us, especially as we have this time to be able to interact and to think and to spend some deeper relationships with people, is this challenge of where have we been hanging on to unforgiveness? We need to learn to examine our lives while we have this time. Find the people that we have been hanging on to bitterness and hurt and forgive. Begin this process so that in turn we can answer the next challenge of offering hope to the world around us. When we can learn to live a lifestyle of forgiveness, we can be beacons of hope in the middle of a world that right now is super uncertain. We need to choose forgiveness. We need to decide to follow Jesus with everything that we are and to allow His life to be the life that permeates the world around us. Man, this morning has been such a really just amazing time. I had such a great time in worship. I know that spending some time together in the chat here has been pretty cool. Being able just to connect and to be able to interact with each other and to be the church, at least in this context of a worship experience. We need to remember, though, that we are called to be the church no matter where we are. So it doesn't end with this online service. We're called to go. And this might look differently for us now. We can't really be in people's homes. We can't be showing up at doors. But we can be a beacon of hope and encouragement online. If any of you have decided here today to make this commitment, either in following Jesus or you're struggling with trying to get over something that you've been struggling with unforgiveness in your life, go ahead and go to the link for the Connect card at the bottom of the chat here. If you head to that link, it'll take you to our Connect card that's online. You can fill that thing out. There's a couple places you can check that I'm interested in a relationship with Jesus. You can check that you're interested in a face-to-face connection. Either of those things is going to get across to us, and we're going to be able to then connect with you and help you walk out the next steps that come with all of these things. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great week, and make sure that your lifestyle of forgiveness leads you to offer hope to the world around you. Have a great week.